An unthinkable act
This was 7 living creatures.
sparks outrage across the country.
It looked like a normal Thursday afternoon chore. A woman in a white Jeep Wrangler pulled into the back lot of a NAPA auto parts store in Coachella, California. She parked near the dumpster, stepped out, and grabbed a clear plastic bag from her car. She didn't look around. She didn't hesitate. She walked to the dumpster, lifted the lid, tossed the bag inside, and closed it. Then she got back in her Jeep and drove away to finish her day. To anyone watching the security footage, it looked like she was taking out the trash. But she wasn't. Inside that plastic bag, tied tight in the sweltering desert heat, 7 hearts were beating in terror. 7 newborn puppies, just 3 days old, eyes still sealed shut, had just been thrown away like garbage. The woman didn't know it yet, but a surveillance camera had captured everything: her face, her license plate, the casual way she disposed of 7 lives. And she didn't know that in a place where people throw things away, there was a man searching for something to survive on, who was about to find what she'd discarded. The reason this story terrified animal experts wasn't just the abandonment. It was the method. It was 1 p.m. in the California desert. April 18, 2019. The temperature outside had already climbed past 90 degrees. Inside a sealed plastic bag, the temperature was climbing faster. A tied plastic bag in direct sunlight acts like a greenhouse. The air heats up instantly. Oxygen disappears. And for 7 puppies barely bigger than a human fist, it became a death chamber. Their eyes wouldn't open for another week. Their legs couldn't carry them. All they could do was feel. The heat pressing in, the air thinning, their siblings piling on top of them as they instinctively tried to find a pocket of cool air that didn't exist. At the bottom of the pile was the smallest one, the runt. He was weaker than the others, and when the bag hit the dumpster, he absorbed the impact. His tiny body cushioned the fall for his 6 siblings. He didn't cry. He barely moved. He just lay there, taking the weight. They had minutes to live, maybe less, and nobody knew they were there. John had been on the streets for longer than he liked to count. Most days blurred together. He woke up wherever he'd found shelter the night before, waited for the heat to become bearable, then made his rounds. Dumpsters behind stores, recycling bins. Anywhere people threw away bottles and cans, anything worth a few cents. It wasn't much of a life, but it was his. On April 18th, John walked up to the dumpster behind the Napa Auto Parts store. He'd been here before. Sometimes the employees threw out damaged packaging, cardboard he could flatten for bedding, or bottles worth a few cents. He lifted the lid and started digging. Then he stopped. A sound. Faint. Almost nothing. At first he thought it was a bird, or maybe a kitten. A soft, high-pitched mewing, barely audible over the traffic on the road. John pushed aside a layer of trash. The sound got louder. He saw the plastic bag, and it was moving. His hands trembled as he reached for it. The bag was hot to the touch. He found the knot and pulled it open. 7 puppies, tiny and barely alive. Their mouths were open, gasping. Their bodies were limp from the heat. John didn't think. He grabbed the bag and ran. He burst through the doors of the auto parts store, startling the employees behind the counter. "Call someone," he said, his voice cracking. "Call the police. Call anyone. They're dying." He laid the bag on the cool tile floor. The air conditioning washed over them. One by one, the puppies started to move again. John knelt beside them, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. John didn't have a home. He didn't have money. He had nothing to give but his time. And in that moment, that was enough. The store employees called 911. Within minutes, Riverside County Animal Services arrived. Commander Chris Mayer took one look at the puppies and felt his stomach turn. They were terrier mixes, probably part Jack Russell. 3 days old at most. Their eyes were still sealed shut. They should have been nursing, safe and warm with their mother. Instead, they were fighting to breathe. If not for the Good Samaritan's actions, Mayer later said, the puppies may not have survived much longer. The team rushed them to the Coachella Valley Animal Campus. The puppies were dehydrated, overheated, and in shock, but they were alive. 6 of them were stabilizing, but the smallest one, the runt, wasn't responding like the others. Mayer turned his attention to the surveillance footage. The camera had captured everything. The white Jeep, the woman's face, the license plate. Her name was Deborah Sue Culwell, and she had no idea what was coming. The next morning, officers arrived at Culwell's home to make the arrest. They expected to find a cruel woman. What they found was a nightmare. The smell hit them first. Even from outside, the stench of ammonia and waste was overwhelming. When they opened the door, it got worse. Inside the single-story house were 38 dogs. They were everywhere, in cages, behind furniture, huddled in corners. The floors were covered in feces and urine. The walls were stained. The house was in what investigators described as severe disrepair. The dogs ranged from 1 to 5 years old. Most were terrier mixes, the same breed as the dumpster puppies. Some barked aggressively at the officers. Others cowered in fear. None of them had been properly socialized or seen a vet in years. Among the 38 dogs was a female terrier who had just given birth. Her nipples were still swollen. She paced her cage, whimpering, searching for something that wasn't there. Culwell hadn't just thrown away 7 lives. She had ripped them from their mother and left her to wonder where they went. All 38 dogs were seized. Culwell was placed in handcuffs. She didn't offer an apology or an explanation. She just stared at the officers like they were the ones who had done something wrong. The 7 puppies were placed in foster care with a volunteer named Noni Bowen Sherm. She had fostered dozens of animals before, but nothing prepared her for this. They were so small and so fragile that they needed to be bottle-fed every 2 hours. Their body temperatures had to be monitored constantly. Any infection, any setback, could kill them. 6 of the puppies were fighting, gaining weight, getting stronger by the day. But the runt wasn't. Noni named him Lucky. It was meant to be hopeful, a name for a survivor. But Lucky wasn't getting better. He ate less than his siblings. He slept more. While the others squirmed and cried for attention, Lucky stayed still, his tiny body curled into a ball. Noni later realized the truth. When the bag had been thrown into the dumpster, Lucky had been at the bottom. He had absorbed the impact. His small body had cushioned the fall for his 6 siblings. He had saved them. But the trauma had been too much. A week after the rescue, Lucky stopped eating entirely. Noni held him through the night, keeping him warm, whispering to him. By morning, he was gone. He never opened his eyes. He never saw the world he'd been born into. But because of him, 6 puppies were still alive. Lucky died a hero. He just never knew it. Then, when the surveillance footage was released, it went viral, and the public outrage was immediate. Millions of people watched a woman calmly throw a bag of living creatures into a dumpster like it was nothing. The comment sections exploded with fury. News stations across the country picked up the story. Culwell was charged with 7 felony counts of animal cruelty and 7 misdemeanor counts of animal abandonment. At her bail hearing, her defense attorney made an argument that would set the Internet on fire. Joseph Kavanaugh adjusted his tie and leaned into the microphone. Your Honor, we are requesting release on own recognizance. Ms. Culwell has lived in this valley her entire life. She has no prior criminal history. She is not a flight risk. He paused, glancing at the prosecution's table, then back to the judge. He decided to play a card that would haunt him. And with all due respect to the state's case, Kavanaugh said, his voice dropping, we must maintain perspective. The charges are serious, yes, but we are not talking about a homicide here. We aren't talking about children." He paused. "Puppies aren't people." A murmur rippled through the gallery. People gasped and shifted in their seats. A woman in the back shook her head. Someone whispered, "Did he really just say that?" The judge, who had been reviewing the file, stopped. He slowly lifted his head, peering over his glasses at the defense table. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. "Puppies aren't people," the judge repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of the words. He didn't sound angry. He sounded disappointed. "You're right, counselor," the judge continued, his voice dangerously calm. "They are not people. They can't hire representation. They can't speak for themselves. And they certainly can't tell us what it felt like to be tied in a bag and thrown into a dumpster in 90-degree heat." Kavanaugh shifted his weight, opening his mouth to pivot back to the flight risk argument. The judge raised a hand. "The request for release on own recognizance is denied." He struck the gavel. "Bail is set at $50,000. Kavanaugh closed his folder. The message was clear. The clip of Kavanaugh's argument went viral within hours. "Puppies aren't people" became a rallying cry for animal advocates demanding justice. Culwell initially pleaded not guilty, but by August 2019, facing overwhelming evidence and an internet that refused to forget, she changed her plea to guilty. The courtroom went quiet as the judge looked down from the bench to deliver the final terms. "For the counts of felony animal cruelty," the judge stated, his voice echoing in the silent room, "I am sentencing you to 365 days in county jail." He continued, 7 years of formal probation, mandatory counseling, and a lifetime ban on owning animals. It was the maximum punishment the law could practically enforce. When the sentence landed, the air seemed to leave the room for everyone but Culwell. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. No shaking of the head, no whispered plea for mercy. She simply stood there, an emptiness in her eyes more chilling than anger. She didn't apologize to the court. She didn't apologize to the community that had been up in arms for months. And she didn't offer a single word for the mother dog sitting in a kennel miles away, confused, alone, and stripped of her litter. "Remand the defendant," the judge ordered. Culwell turned. She extended her wrists for the bailiff as if she were waiting for a bus. She let him lead her away without a backward glance. Behind the bar, the composure in the gallery cracked. Strangers wiped their eyes with tissues. Others gripped the hands of the person next to them. They had all watched the grainy footage of the Jeep. They had all followed Lucky's story, the little runt who took the brunt of the fall so his siblings could live. The heavy door clicked shut behind Culwell. A murmur moved through the crowd. They knew the 365 days would likely be cut short by overcrowding. They knew it wasn't enough to balance the scales for a life lost. But as they filed out into the blinding Coachella sunlight, there was a collective exhale. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. As for the 38 dogs from her house, they were examined, treated, spayed, and neutered, and transferred to rescue organizations for adoption. Every single one of them eventually found a home. To this day, no one knows why Deborah Sue Culwell threw those puppies away. She never explained. She never apologized. She never said their lives mattered. The 6 surviving puppies were dubbed the Miracle Litter. As the weeks passed, they transformed. Their eyes opened. Their legs grew strong. They started to play, to bark, to act like puppies are supposed to act. One of them was named Hope. She was the smallest of the survivors, but she had her brother's fight in her. She ate more than the others. She climbed over her siblings to get attention. She demanded to be held. When she was old enough, Hope was put up for adoption. A family came to meet her, a mother, a father, and 2 young children who had been begging for a puppy for years. When the little girl knelt down and held out her hand, Hope walked straight to her. She didn't hesitate or cower. She climbed into the girl's lap and licked her face. The family signed the papers that afternoon. Hope went home that night, a real home with a bed and a yard and people who would never ever throw her away. After the story went viral, people started asking about the homeless man who saved them. His name was John. That's all anyone knew. Animal Services tracked him down a few weeks after the rescue. They wanted to thank him. They wanted the world to see the man behind the miracle. John didn't want the attention. He'd just heard a sound and done what any decent person would do. But the shelter offered him something: a job, cleaning kennels, feeding animals, helping with intake. Nothing glamorous, but it was steady. And for the first time in years, John had a place to be. John saved those puppies when he had nothing to give but his time. And today, because of him, the miracle litter are not trash. They are family members. They are sleeping in warm beds. And somewhere, in a loving home, Hope is licking the face of a child who loves her. Deborah Culwell had a home, a car, and 38 dogs. She threw 7 puppies in the trash. John had nothing, and he saved them. You don't need money to be a hero. You just need to care. This story is a dramatization based on court records, news archives, and statements from Riverside County Animal Services. The crime, the hoarding, the rescue, the sentencing, and the puppies aren't people statement are all real. The runt's death was confirmed by foster volunteer Noni Bowen Sherm. The names Lucky and Hope were created for this story. Courtroom dialogue has been reconstructed for narrative purposes. John's employment at the shelter has not been independently verified. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know. If you want more stories like this, stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.